He sat quietly in the third row, just another face in the crowd. But when the 12-year-old girl touched the yellow ribbon on her wrist, her German shepherd lunged at him with a growl that froze the courtroom. "He was in our garage," she said. "Max remembers." What happened next turned the entire trial upside down. 12-year-old Lily Henderson had never been inside a courtroom before, but today, the air smelled like fear and dust, and her legs wouldn't stop shaking. Her feet barely touched the floor as she sat on the wooden witness bench, the giant ceiling fan above creaking with every lazy spin. Light filtered through the tall, stained glass windows of the county courthouse, catching on the golden strands of her hair and on the yellow ribbon tied loosely around her wrist. She kept staring at that ribbon, twisting it between her fingers, almost absent-mindedly. But it wasn't just a nervous habit. It was a signal. Across the courtroom, her mother, Kate Henderson, sat at the defense table, her posture upright but trembling inside. Kate's eyes looked hollow, tired from weeks of accusations, media scrutiny, and the terrifying weight of facing 10 years in prison. She hadn't been sleeping, not since the night it all happened. The night Leonard Parr, a well-known city councilman, showed up uninvited in their garage. And now, in front of a half-empty courtroom filled with skeptical jurors and too many reporters, the state had made its case. They said Kate had assaulted a respected public servant with intent. They said there was no forced entry, no proof of threat, just bruises on a man and a frightened daughter clinging to stories that didn't line up. No one mentioned the fear in Kate's voice when she called 911. No one asked why the garage lights were busted or how Parr had entered the property in the first place. No one believed her, except Lily and Max. Max lay near the wall of the courtroom under the watchful eye of Officer Turner. Calm, silent, a hulking shadow of muscle and focus. He was a rescue dog, a retired search and rescue shepherd with one bad hip and a mind like a steel trap. Most people thought he was just a pet. Most people didn't know he had been trained. Lily had done it herself, quietly, carefully. In the months after the divorce, when her mom was working overtime and the world felt unpredictable, Lily found something comforting in having a secret bond with Max. She trained him to respond to simple cues, one of which was the yellow ribbon. A touch meant danger. A twist meant watch. A tug meant act. And now, with the judge frowning, the prosecutor smirking, and Kate looking like a ghost of herself, Lily knew it was time. She brushed her thumb across the ribbon. Slowly, deliberately. Max's ears twitched. His head lifted. No one else noticed. "Miss Henderson," the prosecutor, a young, smug man named Devin Fleming, stepped forward, adjusting his tie like he'd already won. "You're here today to testify on behalf of your mother, correct?" Lily nodded. Her voice caught in her throat. "Yes, sir." "And on the night of March 12th, you claim that Mr. Parr entered your garage without permission and that your mother struck him in self-defense?" Another nod. "Yes." Fleming turned toward the jury, gesturing as though he were teaching preschoolers. "And yet, there is no physical evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints, no witnesses, just a frightened child's recollection. Isn't that right?" Lily looked toward Max. His eyes were locked on her, focused. She twisted the ribbon once more. "Watch." The courtroom was too warm. Her palms were sweating. She wanted to disappear. Then the judge leaned forward, folding his hands. "Do you have anything else to add, Miss Henderson?" he asked, his tone bored, already ready to dismiss her. She took a breath, shallow, unsteady. "Yes," she whispered, "but I need Max." A murmur rolled through the courtroom. The judge frowned. "You need the dog?" Lily stood, her voice steadied as though something deeper was now speaking through her.
Max remembers who was in our garage that night. He never forgets a scent. He's trained, and he knows exactly who it was.
Turner, the officer, looked at the judge, unsure of what to do. The prosecutor laughed, but it was a nervous, sharp thing. Your Honor, with respect, this is... Let her continue. Judge Pierce cut in, his eyes suddenly curious. Lily pointed toward the gallery, the benches where the public sat. Her hand didn't shake anymore.
There, she said. 3rd row, middle seat. The man with the blue shirt and glasses. His name is Bradley Vance. He was with Mr. Parr that night. He helped cut the camera wires.
Bradley Vance flinched. Max exploded from the floor with a growl that made several jurors jump. Turner shouted, trying to hold the leash, but the dog slipped free like a missile, straight at Bradley. He didn't bite. He didn't bark. He just stood there, stiff, teeth bared, eyes burning into the man's soul, refusing to move. And Vance? He froze, pale, sweating, like a man watching his worst nightmare rise from the past. The courtroom was chaos. The judge shouted for order, pounding his gavel. Kate rose to her feet. Fleming turned a ghostly shade of gray. Turner reached Max and gently pulled him back, but the dog refused to look away. All eyes turned to Bradley and Lily. Lily stood calm now, a quiet storm in a sea of panic.
Your Honor, she said, voice clear, he was in our garage. That's the man who broke the camera. I didn't know his name, but Max never forgot his scent. I trained him to remember.
Judge Pierce looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. This court will recess for 10 minutes, he finally said, rising to his feet, visibly shaken. Now. But it was already too late. The truth had entered the room, and it had 4 legs, a scarred ear, and a memory sharper than any lie. The silence that followed the judge's declaration of recess wasn't silence at all. It was a heavy, loaded tension. Whispers buzzed in the gallery like static. Somewhere in the distance, a phone vibrated against a purse. The stenographer had stopped typing mid-word. The court officer's hand hovered near his belt, unsure if this was a moment for protocol or panic. Bradley Vance sat frozen in his seat, lips parted just enough to breathe but not enough to speak. His eyes darted to the exit, then to Max, who stood firm between the benches, one paw forward, tail low, hackles raised but unmoving. Max didn't snarl. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. His stare alone said everything. "You sure you want to run, Mr. Vance?" Officer Turner said quietly, not bothering to reach for cuffs yet. "Because that dog will move faster than any of us, and he'll know exactly where to bite." Bradley didn't answer. Lily watched from the witness box, her hands still in her lap, her eyes calm and unblinking. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the footsteps of the bailiff approaching the judge's bench. But she didn't flinch. Not anymore. Judge Pierce called for his clerk, muttering under his breath, "Get me everything we have on this. Vance, I want records, employment history, connection to Parr, everything. Now." The courtroom had shifted. The atmosphere wasn't one of triumph. Not yet. It was the eye of a storm. Too still. Too quiet. The kind of moment where everything is about to snap. And it did. Because when Vance finally stood, his chair scraping against the tile like nails on glass, Max lunged again. This time Turner grabbed the leash just in time, yanking him back mid-step. But it was enough. Enough to make Vance flinch. Enough to make him look guilty. The bailiff stepped in, his voice hardening. "Sir, you need to remain seated. You are not under arrest, but you are now part of an active inquiry by this court." Vance didn't sit. He turned slowly. He wasn't breathing right. Too shallow, too fast. Then, without warning, he bolted down the aisle toward the exit. Gasps, screams. Turner released Max with a sharp command, and the German shepherd shot forward like a bullet. Within seconds, he leapt, knocking Vance off balance just before he reached the courtroom doors. The man crashed into the double doors with a thud, crumpling under Max's weight as the dog stood over him. Again, not biting, just holding. Court officers swarmed. "Hands where we can see them!" someone shouted. "Do not resist!" Vance didn't resist. He curled into himself like a kicked animal and said nothing. It was over in under 20 seconds. The judge reconvened court within the hour. Faster than usual, but urgency had filled the air like smoke. News crews had gathered outside. Reporters were live blogging from the lobby. Kate sat at the defense table, visibly stunned, her lawyer Ava Monroe whispering rapidly in her ear. Lily had been escorted out for a few minutes, but now sat beside her mother, Max at her feet, panting softly, the leash now wrapped firmly around Ava's wrist. Judge Pierce stared across the bench, expression unreadable. "In light of recent developments," he said, voice slow but firm, "this court is compelled to open a secondary inquiry into the events of March 12th. Specifically, the involvement of Mr. Bradley Vance, a subcontractor affiliated with Councilman Leonard Parr, and his potential presence at the scene of the alleged incident." Fleming, the prosecutor, stood with forced calm. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We have no verified witness testimony, no formal affidavit, and certainly no precedent for a dog's behavior being used as justification for reopening a closed investigation." "Sit down, Mr. Fleming," the judge interrupted coldly. "You had your turn. Now it's mine." Ava stood. "Your Honor, if I may, I've just received a signed statement from Mr. Vance, taken in holding. He admits to being present at the Henderson property that evening. He claims he was ordered there by Councilman Parr to disable the garage camera before a private conversation with Ms. Henderson." The courtroom exploded. Whispers turned to shouts. Someone in the back clapped a hand over their mouth. Judge Pierce's gavel slammed down twice. "Order!" The room quieted again. Ava continued, handing over a printed sheet. In his statement, Mr. Vance also names a second technician who assisted with the job, a man named Curtis Niles, currently out of state but likely reachable. Furthermore, he confirms that Kate Henderson told Parr to leave multiple times, and that Parr became aggressive when she refused to drop her legal complaints against his redevelopment plans. Kate's shoulders slumped. The weight of weeks, no, months, seemed to drop from her at once. Judge Pierce read the paper slowly, then looked up. "And where exactly is this Curtis Niles now?" "Denver," Ava said. "He boarded a flight 2 days ago. We're requesting a subpoena immediately." The judge nodded once. "Approved. And this court formally suspends all active prosecution against Ms. Henderson pending further review. In the meantime, she is free to go." Kate broke. Tears flowed freely now, and Lily rushed into her arms, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Max, as if sensing the moment, laid his head gently on Kate's lap. It was the closest thing to peace they'd had in weeks. But it wasn't over. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her bedroom, tracing the shape of Max's ear with her fingertip, listening to the quiet thump of his tail. The window was cracked open, letting in the distant sounds of the town. Cars passing, cicadas buzzing. Kate sat beside her, cross-legged, the same yellow ribbon tied loosely around her wrist now. "You were so brave," she whispered. Lily didn't look up. "I just wanted them to know the truth." Kate nodded, brushing a hand through her daughter's hair. "They will, baby. They will." Outside, a new headline blinked across phone screens. "Girl's dog outs accomplice in court. Trial in free fall." Tomorrow would bring more hearings, more press, maybe even more threats. But for tonight, justice had a name. And it was Max. The next morning, courtroom B of the Jefferson County Courthouse was standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall like vultures waiting for a break in the clouds. The benches were packed with curious townspeople, law students, and off-duty cops who just happened to be nearby. Kate sat at the defense table, now no longer in shackles, her hands resting protectively over Lily's. Her lawyer, Ava Monroe, looked like she hadn't slept, and probably hadn't. But her eyes were sharp, calculating. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Devin Fleming looked like a man trying not to drown in quicksand. Judge Pierce, however, looked like someone who had already made up his mind, and wasn't pleased with what he'd decided. He cleared his throat and began. This court has reviewed yesterday's developments, including the signed statement from Mr. Vance and the preliminary confirmation of his connection to Councilman Leonard Parr. Further investigation has also revealed that surveillance systems at Mr. Parr's private residence were remotely wiped 2 days after the incident in question, an action traced back to a device registered to Mr. Curtis Niles. A sharp breath rippled through the gallery. Fleming stood, his jaw tight. "Your Honor, Sit down, Mr. Fleming," the judge snapped. "This is not a debate." Fleming sat. Lily watched it all in silence. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around the yellow ribbon tied to her wrist again. Max lay beside her, one paw resting over her foot like a living anchor. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She watched. Pierce leaned back, his voice low, like a warning rumble before thunder. "There appears to have been a coordinated effort to erase material evidence, manipulate witness statements, and apply pressure to halt a legitimate legal complaint filed by the defendant. That alone would be grounds for dismissal. But it goes deeper." He paused, letting the tension thicken. "This court has also received an anonymous package this morning." He lifted a manila folder from his bench, containing a data drive retrieved from a tablet once belonging to Councilman Parr. On it, a backup file labeled Garage Cam, encrypted but now cracked by our forensic team. Fleming's face went gray. Judge Pierce tapped the folder once with his fingers. The footage shows Mr. Vance disabling the garage camera at 9:18 p.m. Parr arrives at 9:21. He enters the Henderson garage, uninvited, and engages in a loud verbal altercation with Ms. Henderson. At 9:24, he reaches for her arm. The struggle begins. At no point does Ms. Henderson initiate the contact. Boom. Just like that, the room imploded. Gasps, murmurs. Someone cursed under their breath. Several phones vibrated in pockets as texts flew across town like wildfire. She was telling the truth. The whole time. Kate closed her eyes. Her body trembled. Not with fear, but with release. Lily didn't let go of her hand. Fleming stood again, now sweating. "Your Honor, may I?" "No," the judge said, not raising his voice. "You may not." He turned to the jury, who still sat stunned, like school children witnessing a teacher's breakdown. "This trial is hereby declared a mistrial due to prosecutorial negligence and suppression of exculpatory evidence. All charges against Catherine Henderson are dismissed, effective immediately." Then, softer. "Ms. Henderson, this court owes you an apology." Kate didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed up. Ava reached for a tissue and passed it into her shaking hands. And Lily just sat there, quiet, focused. She'd seen the cracks form, and now she watched the system shatter. Outside the courthouse, a frenzy had erupted. News vans parked crookedly along Main Street. Journalists shoved microphones through crowds. Some chanted Kate's name. Others shouted about corruption. Someone held up a sign. "Listen to her. The dog knew." Bradley Vance had been moved into protective custody that morning. The moment news of the garage footage broke, he'd confessed fully. naming Parr as the architect of the whole setup. Parr, however, was gone, fled, resigned from the city council by fax just hours before court resumed. A man who once smiled in press conferences with mayors now existed as a red dot on every national network's wanted list. But the real attention wasn't on him anymore. It was on the girl. That afternoon, a press conference was held on the courthouse steps. Dozens gathered, cameras pointed forward, lights blinding. But when Ava tried to bring Kate up to speak, the crowd shouted one name. "Lily! Lily! Lily!" So Lily stepped up. Max at her side. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need to. She looked into the cameras, at thousands, maybe millions of watching eyes, and said one sentence. Sometimes the truth just needs someone to remember it, and someone to listen. Then she turned and walked away. The applause followed her down the steps and all the way to the car. That night, Judge Pierce sat alone in his chambers, staring at the footage again, watching Parr's movements frame by frame. The way he entered the garage, the smirk on his face, the shadows, the raised hand, the camera that should have never recorded, and the child who never stopped believing it would matter. He rubbed his temples. He'd failed her. He hadn't listened, hadn't looked past the suit and status of Parr long enough to see a scared woman telling the truth, a child desperate to be heard. He swore under his breath and opened a drawer. Inside was an envelope with an official seal, a complaint from Ava Monroe filed 2 weeks earlier, alleging procedural bias in family court cases involving minors. He hadn't even opened it. Until now. Meanwhile, Kate and Lily lay curled on the couch at home, wrapped in a blanket Max occasionally nudged with his nose. The house was quiet, too quiet after the storm. On the table sat a letter from the mayor's office, requesting Kate's input in forming a new oversight committee. Kate hadn't answered yet, but she would. She had a voice now, one that wouldn't be silenced again. And Lily? She had something more powerful than any court ruling. She had proof that one small gesture, one touch of a ribbon, could bring giants to their knees. And Max? He slept by the door, still watching, still ready. It had been 6 days since the trial collapsed. 6 days since the footage played, the courtroom erupted, and Bradley Vance sang like a bird. 6 days since Councilman Leonard Parr vanished, leaving behind a wreckage of lawsuits, resignations, and one permanently stained reputation. The justice system, once so confident in its correctness, now walked on shattered glass, reviewing procedures, questioning old cases, and pointing fingers at itself. But none of that was on Lily Henderson's mind today. Today, she was standing at the gates of the Jefferson County Animal Shelter with Max beside her, a microphone clipped to her sweater, and dozens of camera lenses pointed at her face. She hated the attention, the noise, the way people stared like she was some kind of prophet. But she stood tall, because behind her, on the fresh green lawn, a new bronze statue had just been unveiled. A German shepherd, one paw lifted, head turned back protectively, ears alert. The plaque read, "Max, the dog who remembered." Below it, smaller, "And the girl who never let the truth be forgotten." The crowd erupted in applause. Lily didn't smile, not yet. Her eyes searched the front row, for her mom, holding back tears. For Ava Monroe, arms crossed, proud and still visibly angry at the system. And for Judge Pierce, standing silently in the back, not in robes, but in a simple gray jacket, hat in hand, head bowed. When the applause died, Lily finally stepped up to the microphone. She didn't speak like a child. She spoke like someone who'd seen the inside of silence and fought her way out. "Most people don't believe kids," she began, her voice steady.
They think we're too small, too young, too scared. But sometimes we're just the only ones willing to say the hard things. And sometimes the only ones listening are the ones without a voice. She glanced down at Max, who sat like royalty beside her. I didn't know what would happen when I touched the ribbon. I didn't know if anyone would believe him, but I knew he remembered, and I knew the truth would come out if someone just gave it a chance. The wind caught her hair as she stepped back. Then she whispered to Max, "We did it." And Max, as if understanding the weight of it all, rested his chin against her side and closed his eyes. Later that afternoon, back at home, the world finally slowed down. The Henderson home, once filled with tension, whispers, and sleepless nights, now smelled like cinnamon bread and freshly cut grass. Sunlight poured in through the kitchen windows. Kate sat at the table, flipping through letters from community leaders, nonprofit groups, and civil rights organizations. The one on top was from the state governor. She didn't know what to say to most of them. She wasn't a hero. She was a mother who panicked in her own garage and hit a man who wouldn't leave her alone. But she was also the woman who taught her daughter to speak with strength and to raise a dog that would never forget the truth. Kate looked up as Lily walked in, a bowl of water for Max in her hands. "You sure you want to do this interview tomorrow?" Kate asked. Lily nodded. "Just one more." "And after that?" "I want to stop talking," Lily said, "and start doing." Kate raised an eyebrow. Lily pulled a folded flyer from her hoodie pocket and slid it across the table. It was a mock-up for a new youth initiative, the Ribbon Project, created to train therapy and support dogs to work alongside children in legal situations, funded by donations pouring in since the trial went public, designed by a 12-year-old girl who understood what it meant to be seen but not heard. Kate covered her mouth. You want to run this?" "No," Lily said. "I want to build it." And Kate, for the first time in a long time, let herself smile without restraint. That evening, Judge Pierce stood in his office alone, lights dimmed, the courthouse now eerily quiet after hours. He stared out the window, the statue of Max visible even from here. He hadn't meant to ignore the truth. He'd been tired, overworked, convinced by the polish and power of Parr's reputation, and worst of all, indifferent. But Lily's testimony and Max's reaction had shaken something in him that had gone dormant over the years. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter of resignation. Not from the bench. No, he wasn't running. It was a transfer request to the juvenile division. He wanted to go where voices like Lily's were more than just allowed. They were heard. He signed the form. Then he reached into his coat pocket and tied a yellow ribbon to his pen. For memory, for accountability, for Max. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued. Councilman Parr was found in New Mexico, hiding under an alias. He was arrested without incident and immediately charged with evidence tampering, unlawful entry, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The headlines were ruthless. But the stories that mattered more weren't on the front page. They were whispered in classrooms, shared in quiet homes, and printed on flyers in shelters across the country. If they don't believe you, keep speaking. Even a dog can tell the truth. A girl and her shepherd took down a system with a ribbon and a growl. The world hadn't changed overnight, but for one family and one courtroom, it had changed forever. And as Lily stood under the stars that night, Max curled at her feet, and the world finally exhaled. She whispered the words she'd been too scared to say before. "I believe in justice now." And for the first time, she believed it would believe in her too.